Picture this: Saigon, April 30th, 1975. You have 72 hours to decide: stay under communist rule or risk drowning in the South China Sea. Your neighbour, a doctor who saved lives for 20 years, is wrapping thin sheets of gold in fabric. Kim Than, they call it. Gold leaves. He's converting his entire life savings into something the size of a deck of cards. The legitimate ferry to Malaysia, $10 per person. The smuggler's dinghy across open water, $1,000 per person. Your family of 4 needs $4,000 in cash, in a currency the smuggler will accept, and you have 48 hours. The doctor with the gold leaves? He's boarding the boat, the family with savings in a Saigon bank account, still waiting. 1.5 million Vietnamese fled across the South China Sea using this exact protocol. This isn't fiction. This was documented survival strategy during one of the 20th century's largest refugee crises. Let me tell you what nobody's saying out loud about precious metals. Gold isn't for buying bread during collapse. It's not for trading cigarettes at checkpoints. It's for the moment when borders close, institutions fail, and you need to move your family across an international boundary with your accumulated life savings intact. The autopsy is complete. The cause of death is always the same, and the survivors all carried the same insurance policy. The Vietnamese boat people developed one of the most sophisticated escape systems in modern history, and it's centered on Kim Than. Extraordinarily thin sheets of pure gold pressed into stacks and wrapped to minimize bulk. Here's the genius. A 1-ounce gold bar is worth $4,300 at current prices. That's 31 grams. Conspicuous, recognizable, immediately identifiable to any border guard conducting searches. Gold leaves, by contrast, could be stacked thin, wrapped in fabric, flattened into packages no larger than a deck of playing cards. When discovered during searches, they might be mistaken for aluminum foil by officials conducting cursory inspections. A Vietnamese refugee family could carry thousands of dollars in value in a package weighing virtually nothing. When a guard discovers what appears to be thin metal sheets, the immediate assessment may be that the item lacks significant value. Discovery of a recognizable gold bar triggers immediate confiscation. But here's the revelation that changes everything. These families didn't accumulate gold to spend during the crisis. They accumulated it to cross borders during the crisis and rebuild after the crisis ended. Vienna, 1938. You're a Jewish banker watching the Anschluss unfold. You have a certificate of deposit worth 50,000 Reichsmarks. Your colleague has 3 diamonds sewn into his coat lining. Guess which one of you makes it to Switzerland? The most extensively documented case involves Oskar Schindler bribing SS officers with black market goods, food, and diamonds to secure the release of hundreds of Jewish workers from concentration camps. These bribes worked because diamonds and gold retained purchasing power, even as the Nazi system was engaged in systematic genocide. The critical element: these bribes could not be refused by Nazi officials because they represented real value that could be converted to currency or consumed directly. A person holding a certificate of deposit from a Vienna bank could not use that document to bribe a border guard. The document was either worthless or could be used to identify the holder as a target. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Paper assets that depend on institutional validation evaporate when those institutions become your enemy. Tangible assets that require no external authority maintain value because their physical properties, their elemental composition, their density, their rarity, are recognized universally. Let's forensically examine what safe passage actually costs in contemporary conflict zones. Syria, 2015 to 2016. 1 million Syrians reached Greece in 18 months. The pricing structure was remarkably consistent. Smugglers charged approximately €1,000 per person for a seat in a dinghy to cross from Turkey to Greece. The legitimate ferry ticket? €10. A 10,000% markup by converting a legal journey into an illegal one managed by criminal networks. A Syrian family of 4 needed €4,000, months or years of savings, simply to secure crossing to Greece. Critically, this price was denominated in euros or US dollars. Families needed to convert local Syrian currency into foreign currency that smugglers would accept. Ukraine, February 24, 2022. Russian tanks crossed the border at dawn. 50,000 people fled in the first 48 hours. Banks suspended electronic transfers. ATMs emptied within hours. You have $20,000 in your account. On paper, In practice, you have nothing. One Ukrainian refugee escaped with Bitcoin on a USB drive and a written seed phrase. He sold some to people he knew personally for cash, obtaining $600 worth of Polish zloty. Bitcoin worked for exactly one documented refugee. Here's what breaks the model entirely for digital assets. Bitcoin requires internet connectivity to verify the blockchain, electricity to power devices, access to cryptocurrency exchanges, and familiarity with digital security procedures. Gold requires none of this. A refugee with gold can cross into any country with any degree of economic development, and gold will retain its value and convertibility. Gold can be traded in the wealthiest countries with sophisticated banking systems, and it can be traded in the poorest countries with only informal currency markets, because gold is universally recognized. The most telling detail in the Ukrainian Bitcoin case. The refugee didn't continue living in Poland as a Bitcoin holder. He converted his Bitcoin to fiat currency as rapidly as possible. Even in the most favorable circumstances for cryptocurrency, a tech-savvy refugee from a country with functioning cryptocurrency infrastructure, digital assets are treated as an intermediate step toward obtaining hard currency that can be spent on food, shelter, and passage. Venezuela provides the control case. When the bolivar collapsed from 6.3 per US dollar in 2013 to over 3,000 per dollar by 2016, inflation reached 4,000% in 2017 alone. Your $10,000 in savings became worth $250. Venezuelans who had accumulated savings in local currency saw their wealth evaporate. Those with gold saw nominal bolivar value increase substantially and could trade gold in black markets for US dollars at rates reflecting true international value. If you're realizing everything you thought you knew about economic security is wrong, hit that subscribe button. This is the Independent Financial Historian. I perform autopsies on dead empires so you see the patterns before they repeat in your backyard. Drop a helicopter emoji if you're positioning yourself for what's coming, and tell me what you want me to dig into next. I read every single one. One of you said it perfectly after the last video. Gold isn't for getting you through collapse, it's for setting you up on the other side. Exactly right. Let's keep going. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually reach a safe country, because this is where most people's exit protocol falls apart. Under the Bank Secrecy Act, anyone entering or leaving the United States with more than $10,000 in currency must file FinCEN Form 105. Here's the legal loophole that reveals why gold beats cash. Physical gold bullion and bars are not classified as currency or monetary instruments under the Bank Secrecy Act. Someone carrying $50,000 worth of gold bars across the US border does not technically trigger the Form 105 filing requirement. Someone carrying $10,001 in cash does. But here's the trap. While gold is not classified as currency, it's still subject to customs declaration obligations. Failure to declare precious metals accurately results in seizure under customs enforcement powers. Not declaring gold is not a Bank Secrecy Act violation, but it is a customs law violation and results in confiscation of the entire amount under civil asset forfeiture statutes. The procedural mechanics are brutal. When US Customs seizes assets, they issue a notice of seizure. You have 30 days to respond. For someone who just fled a war zone with no legal representation, no understanding of American legal procedures, and potentially no stable address, this process becomes practically impossible to navigate. The burden of proof falls on you to demonstrate the seized assets are not connected to illegal activity. For someone fleeing a conflict zone with gold, accumulated through decades of working and saving, proving legitimate source without access to bank records or documentation becomes extremely difficult. Stay with me on this, because this is where theory meets ground truth and most people's strategy collapses. A 1-ounce gold bar represents $4,340 at current market prices. For a refugee attempting to bribe a border guard for passage costing $300 to $500, offering an entire 1-ounce bar represents massive overpayment, requiring complex negotiations about change. Moreover, a 1-ounce bar cannot be simply broken into fractions without specialized equipment. If you offer a bar worth $4,300 for passage costing $300, you have no practical way to access the remaining $4,000 in value without finding a jeweler to melt and divide it, unlikely at a border checkpoint. The optimal denomination is the fractional bar, specifically 1 gram, 5 gram, 10 gram bars. A 1 gram gold bar weighs 0.032 troy ounces and is worth roughly $140 at current gold prices, small enough to use as medium of exchange for specific services without complex negotiations. A refugee can offer a 1 gram bar for passage, and the guard knows instantly the approximate value. This distribution provides multiple advantages: reduces catastrophic loss if a single bar is discovered and seized, provides granularity for actual transactions, allows strategic deployment of wealth at different stages of escape. You use 1 gram bars for fuel and guides in early stages, 5 gram or 10 gram bars for smugglers, larger bars for final transactions in destination country. Here's what the data is screaming at us about why hard metals work when authority collapses. Gold represents value that requires no explanation, no justification, no appeal to external authorities for validation. When a border guard encounters someone offering a gold coin, the guard instantly recognizes genuine value without needing to verify through any institutional mechanism. During state collapse, precisely when exit protocol becomes necessary, institutional authority that validates paper currency evaporates. A guard from a regime losing a war will not accept that regime's currency as payment because the guard fears the regime will collapse entirely, rendering currency worthless. Gold transcends any particular regime or political system. A Nazi official in the final days of World War II would refuse a suitcase of Reichsmarks, but might accept gold as a bribe precisely because gold maintains value across regime changes. One of you commenting on my last video said it perfectly. My grandfather, who went through 2 world wars in Germany, often said you needed enough silver or gold coins to be able to bribe a guard. Your grandfather understood what money actually is when the state becomes your enemy. The certainty of liquidity shapes the guard's willingness to accept the bribe. Gold can be converted to cash in any country in the world, at any time, at a price determined by well-established global markets. When you offer a guard a gold bar, the guard understands they can walk into any gold buyer or international banking institution and convert that gold to cash within hours. For someone successfully reaching a safe country seeking to keep accumulated gold without seizure, proper documentation becomes essential. The critical principle, declaring assets at the border, creates friction and delays, but failure to declare creates near certainty of seizure. The most effective legal strategy involves carrying proof of purchase, invoices, receipts, certificates of authenticity, assay certificates. For someone who accumulated gold over decades before fleeing, this documentation may be impossible to obtain, but even partial documentation strengthens your legal position. Once customs officials discover you attempted to conceal assets, your credibility is destroyed. It's generally more effective to declare all holdings upon arrival and accept the delays and inquiries that result, rather than attempt partial concealment likely to be discovered. A more sophisticated strategy: enter initially without attempting to import large quantities, then later import metals through legal channels once you've established residency and can work with legal counsel. This approach avoids risk of having all accumulated wealth seized at initial border crossing. So what do? 5 elements. 1. Accumulate fractional gold now. Not 1 ounce bars, 1 gram, 5 gram, 10 gram denominations. Purchase small quantities continuously over years, not large quantities suddenly. 2. Distribute across your body during transport. Money belt, pockets, clothing linings. If any single location is discovered, entire wealth is not lost. 3. Assume 10 to 30% loss to bribes, seizures, theft. Accumulate more than you expect to need. 4. Declare all holdings at destination country border. Carry any documentation you have. Engage legal counsel immediately. 5. Understand this is insurance for the worst-case scenario, not for buying bread during collapse, for crossing borders when institutions fail and preserving accumulated life savings across regime changes. If this forensic breakdown gave you a new lens, hit subscribe. This one was inspired by your comments demanding practical survival assets instead of financial theory. Drop a helicopter emoji if you're already positioning for what's coming and tell me what you want me to dig into next. The question isn't whether you'll be affected. The question is whether you'll see it coming, or be standing at a closed border wondering why your bank account shows $20,000 on paper but the ATM is empty, while the person next to you with a deck of cards-sized package of gold leaves is boarding the boat to safety. Pattern recognition isn't pessimism, it's preparation. The precedent isn't ambiguous, it's definitive. 1.5 million Vietnamese, millions of Jewish refugees, 1 million Syrians, 5.8 million Ukrainians, same